Now that you've got your headline, the next thing you want to think about is placing your story on your page. Placing your story is similar to placing headlines. First, you want to go to text, and this time you want body text blank. Click that, and it'll create a blank text box on your page. Once you click off the text box, even though it's invisible, if you move your mouse over it, it's still there, and you can actually click and drag it next to your headline. Now, do your best to allow for some space between your headline and your story. Draw your text box along to the margin, and then the next thing you need to do is find your story. Typically, your story will be placed in your Google Drive account since you wrote it. So you go to your folder, find your Google Docs, and open it. Mine's already open. You can do one of two things. You can put your cursor at the top and highlight the whole story by clicking and dragging, or you can place your cursor once in the story and hit Control A, and that will select the whole story. To copy it, you need to hit Control C, which means for copy. Go back to LucidPress. Put your cursor in the text box and hit Control V like Velcro. You're sticking it into that text box. Now, the text isn't going to be in the right format. We must change that. So as we've already talked about, your menu on the right is going to be the place where you do that. The easiest thing to do is put your text box in the cursor once. Hit Control A, and that will select all the text you can and cannot see. Then go over here to where you choose your fonts. The font we're going to use for stories, if it's in your menu, if not, you'll need to go add it, is called, let's see if I can find it, Old Standard TT. That is going to be the story font we use. By clicking Old Standard TT, the problem with that is it's bold. If you can't see it, since it's kind of far away, the easiest thing to do is hit Control and plus sign a few times. Plus, plus, plus. So I can see my story a little bit better. Now, once you put it in Old Standard TT, or you might be looking at Newton, the problem is it's bold, and there's some weird double spacing in between the paragraphs. So if you hit Control A, you want to unbold it. The next thing we want to do is skip alignment, skip bullets and lists, and go down to spacing. The first one will be line. The paragraph spacing will be 0. So hit 0 and hit enter, and all that spacing in between the text will disappear. Shrink that. The next thing you want to do is we'll skip columns for now and go to tabs and indents. Under first line, instead of 0 inches, you want 0.2 inches. Hit enter. And what that will do is it'll automatically add indents. Now, what I did not do is hit Control A. So hit Control A, hit 0.2, hit enter, and that'll automatically give your story indents. Now, we want to go back to columns. Depending on the space between the margins and the headline, or however your story looks, you want to either do 2 columns or 3 columns. Now, for this spacing, I'm going to do 2 columns. That looks much better. Underneath columns in the gutter, you're going to highlight that 0.25 and actually change it to 0.167, hit enter. And it's not a huge difference, but this is the space we want between the columns. If you notice it, it's almost one set of squares. Now I've got a little more text still, so I'll hit the plus sign and drag it down. Get my arrow. And by dragging it down, I'm pulling the rest of the story. Now that's the end of the story, and so I'm going to click and drag it so it fits perfectly, or as perfect as I can make it. And that is how you place a story. You're going to have story by your names at the top. So what you want to do is make sure you only highlight that line, go back up to the top of the menu and hit italics. And that is how you place your story. Now, one more final touch is you want to justify the text. Right now, the text in the columns is kind of zigzaggy. Hit Control A, go over here to alignment, and click the very last menu option, which is justify text, and that forces it into a rectangle. Clicking off and zooming out, Control minus, 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 you're going to see that your story looks really nice and clean and in a rectangle and very even. And that is how you place story text simply in LucidPress.